Hey guys, Matt McKeever here. So I wanted to do a day in the life of video. It's been a while since I did one, so I figured I'd do one today. Now the only thing is, this isn't actually really going to be documenting a day in the life of. It's really going to be focusing on two properties that myself and Jeff Weibel have been negotiating on for quite a while. Been a lot of back and forth. The one property we've been following at least for the last couple months. The other one just recently got on our radar, but it's also kind of an interesting story, so I want to share it with you guys. So let's get into it. So we'll just take them one at a time. So we'll focus on property number one first. So property number one, me and Jeff saw this property originally when it was originally listed probably 6 months ago. And so about 6 months ago it was listed for $170,000. So they had listed for $170,000, which was too expensive at that price point. I wasn't really interested in it. We still walked through and checked it out and just reached out to the sellers verbally and spoke to the seller's agent and said, look, you guys are way overpriced at $170,000. However, if you're flexible on terms and on your price, we can maybe figure out some sort of deal where we can close quickly on this and just get this property off your hands, because we knew it was kind of an estate sale. It was sitting vacant. They were still going to be paying property taxes, insurance, and utilities on this property until they sold it, and it was just going to sit there vacant. So we're trying to present that to them as a bit of a win-win. Now, they weren't interested in that at all, so we just kind of walked away. There wasn't even sense putting anything down on paper. We could just tell the sellers were way too sticky on their price at this current point in time. So we walked away and we said, we'll come back when you guys do a price drop and maybe once you're aware of where the market's really at these days. So it sat there for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months. And now just recently they did a price drop to $150,000. And so that $150,000 started getting a bit more interesting for us. So price drop.
And so they came in at $150,000.
So Jeff and I went and checked it out a second time. Nothing had really changed. It was still sitting there vacant. At that $150,000 price point, we're starting to get a lot closer to where I needed it to be for this to be a good investment for myself. However, we're still pretty far apart. Jeff reached out to them just verbally again and just said, hey guys, we're interested in the property, but probably not at your price point. Does it make sense for us to still put in an offer? And so we're just trying to get a feel for them. Were they still as sticky as they were back at $170,000, or were they starting to warm up now and just wanted to sell the property and get it off their hands? They told us to go ahead and put in an offer. So like we do with every property, me and Jeff pulled the comps in the area recently, and we found that the most recent sale on that street was actually for $110,000. So armed with the knowledge, the most recent sale in the area was $110,000, and that was for a cash flowing triplex, whereas this was a single family home. Now, both these houses were built at the exact same time and to the exact same specifications, so the only real difference was the house that had sold for $110,000 had already been converted to a triplex, whereas the house we were planning to purchase, we'd be still having to convert that into a duplex or triplex. In this particular situation, I decided that I was going to convert it to a duplex if I was able to buy the property at a reasonable price. So, armed with this knowledge, and we also knew that this time of year in Canada, it's December, so we got about over a foot of snow. So usually most buyers, especially first-time buyers and personal residence buyers, aren't looking in the months of December and January, which makes it a great time to buy if you're a real estate investor. However, we knew the competition was going to be very thin. Christmas is coming up, so just a lot of people usually kind of slow down in the month of December. So we reached out to the seller and told them they can expect an offer that's coming. It's going to be lower than asking, but we think that we have some very fair terms and we can close quickly, which we were hoping would be very enticing to them. Armed with the knowledge that $110,000 was the most recent comp, and knowing what I needed from my budget in order to make this a profitable investment, we offered $115,000. So, in addition to offering $115,000, we put together a really well thought out and well worded cover letter, and in that cover letter we mentioned, you know, the most recent sale on the street was for a triplex at $110,000. Your property, we're offering $115,000, which is $5,000 more than the most recent sale. In addition to that, your property still needs all the costs associated with converting it to a duplex or a triplex. Also, it's winter right now and Christmas is coming up. we can give you the best Christmas present of all time by selling this property, getting it off your hands, and you can be free and clear in 4 weeks if you want. And you're not going to have to worry about this property ever again, and you can just wash your hands of that. In addition to that, we also brought up all sorts of other factors that were going to hinder their ability to sell it. So we focused on things like it had less parking than the average homeowner would be looking for if it was going to become a personal residence. It was in a still transitioning neighborhood. And we just essentially put together 1-page cover letter that just documented all the reasons they should consider our offer, even though we're substantially below their asking. We offered 115. They came back with a counter. So they countered around 148,000 to our 115. So Jeff reached out verbally to them a second time and just said, hey guys, look, we're obviously still very far apart on our price point. We don't have a lot of room to come up because we're still going to incur all these substantial renovations in order to convert your house to a duplex. If this is your best counter offer, if you're not willing to go substantially below 148, it probably doesn't make sense for us to continue negotiating on this property, and we'll come back once you've done another price drop in a couple months when you haven't been able to sell it. Their agent reached back out to Jeff, and this agent countered back to Jeff's comments and said, we've had a lot of interest since our price dropped from 170 to 150. Things are really heating up. I think you should consider making your best offer if you still want to get this property. We shrugged and said 115 or close to it is our best offer. There's not much more we can do for you. So we essentially just broke off communications with them. And this is an important lesson. When it comes to real estate investing, you can't get emotional and you need to be patient. Honestly, you trust in your numbers. If the numbers don't work, you just have to walk away from a deal. And who knows, maybe you can come back in a couple months and it'll be dropped to a price point now where you're able to come in and get the numbers you need. Or maybe the area will have appreciated to a point where now your numbers make sense to buy it at their asking price. So about a week after they countered our 115 with 148, they did a second price drop
and dropped it
on the MLS back to the price that they had countered to us at. So they dropped it to around 148. At the time of this price drop, they reached out to Jeff again and said, hey Jeff, just want to let you know, things have been really heating up since we dropped it to 150. We've decided to drop it another 2,000 and we're expecting to sell it really soon. If you guys are interested, reach out and let's make a deal. And this is the point where me and Jeff just shake our heads. Like, are you guys even listening to anything we're saying? The most recent sale on your street was $110,000 for the exact same house, except for that house was a triplex. Yours is a single family home that hasn't been updated since the 1970s. And so we just said to them, no, you guys are out to lunch on your price. We're offering you a fast close and an easy close. That's what we bring to the table here. If you're going to wait for that 148 price range, you're going to have to wait till at least spring. And then you're still going to have to be praying that the markets appreciate to such a point that that price is now justified. And this is the thing that can get frustrating when you're negotiating with sellers, particularly sellers whose agents aren't appropriately managing their expectations either. So like this agent originally, when they listed it at that 170 price range, promised them the world, and it was a completely unreasonable promise. And then when they dropped to 150, I'm sure that agent again promised them the world, and it was still an unreasonable promise, especially based on the current market conditions, which was that winter's here. Winter isn't coming, winter is here. Christmas is here. No one buys in December or January other than investors, so you're not going to get an emotional home buyer. And even if you could, your house in particular doesn't have the features most home buyers want. Features like parking for multiple vehicles, features like a backyard, all these different things that a lot of homeowners are going to want in a property, but a real estate investor won't mind in particular. So on this deal in particular, we've just had to walk away and we'll see what happens. I'll keep you guys posted, but right now it looks like nothing's going to be happening till January. Maybe we'll get cute and put in an offer on December 24th or 25th just to kick the tires and let them know we're still alive and interested, but that they need to come down still substantially on their price. So that was property number one. So on property number two, this property number two, it was listed about 6 months ago. I wasn't overly interested at the time because one, they'd done a really poor description on the MLS, so when I read it, I didn't realize that it was a duplex, and two, it was overpriced. So they were originally asking 150, I think, and just based on the condition of the units and stuff, 150 was going to be a really high price. to be asking. 150 was just too high. I wasn't overly interested in it, and no one else in the market was either. So about a couple weeks ago, they did a price drop and dropped it to 130. And so at 130 it starts to get interesting. In my mind, the deal's still just a little too tight at 130 for me to want to spend the time and effort, but it was worth checking out. So me and Jeff and one of my property managers went and checked it out. We walked through it. It had some potential. There's some interesting things that we weren't aware of based on the listing that we found out while we were walking through it. So that added a little bit more value. But again, I kind of looked at it and figured 120. About 120 is the most I'm willing to pay for this property and be able to fix it up and BRRRR it in the manner I wanted. So as we do on pretty much every property we look at that we're interested in, Jeff reached out to the seller's agent, tried to learn a bit more about the seller's backstory, found out it was his father's home he'd kind of inherited, and now he's just cleaning up the estate and trying to sell it. We told him, you know, we think you're still just a little overpriced. The house has been sitting vacant for a long time. It's got a lot of unique, individualistic decorating choices that are all going to need to be redone for a new homeowner or for a new renter. And while that was great for your father and it definitely showed his personal taste, that's not going to be the taste of your average buyer. And so we're going to end up having to spend a lot of money fixing it up and improving it to the point where your average buyer or your average renter is going to be interested in this property. So we originally offered 105. They countered at
128.
So we originally offered 105, they countered 128. We're still really far apart. Jeff reached out to them verbally and said, look, we're pretty far apart here. Does it even make sense for us to keep coming back and doing a counter offer to your counter if you're that sticky on your price point? Their agent told us we're not that far apart. Let's just keep trying to make a deal happen. So we decided to come back and we offered 114. And so 114 now is starting to get close to that 120 range that was kind of my drop dead price range. So 114, they countered again at 128, which was very frustrating because we'd spent the time. And again on this property, we did the nice cover letter, we explained our logic, we kind of outlined all the substantial renovations that were going to be required. And to be honest, it's one of those situations where I'm not even scared to outline the amount of work that's required in order to make this property more enticing to a seller or to a buyer or to a renter, because I know most homeowners aren't going to take the initiative to actually follow through on it. You know, these guys could have taken our cover letter and used that as a blueprint to improve their property. But most people aren't going to bother to take the action. Most people don't have the motivation or the gumption to get involved and roll up their sleeves and get dirty. So they came back at 128. We were frustrated, kind of threw up our hands and said, like, what's the point of doing this? But at the same time, I didn't have a project going on for the winter, and I want something to keep me busy and keep some of the guys that I use to do work busy. So me and Jeff talked it through, and I decided, you know what? Screw this. I'm just going to make my absolute best offer on the property. If they take it, great. If not, we'll move on to the next one. So we came in then at 120. So we offered 120. Jeff spoke to the seller's agent and said, listen, this is the absolute most we're willing to pay for this property. You guys can either accept it at 120 and you'll have the knowledge that you've sold it before Christmas and you can have a great Christmas not having to worry about doing open houses and trying to sell this property and negotiate on it and have to pay all the holding costs like insurance, property taxes, and utilities. That's when things got weird. So they'd originally countered us. When we did 105, they countered 128. When we did 114, they did 128. When we did 120, they came at 127. Now we told them that 120 was the absolute best we were willing to do on this deal, and clearly they weren't paying attention. Myself and Jeff were very frustrated. Jeff called the seller's agent and said, look, clearly you're not paying attention to what we're saying here. We're going to walk away. If you decide that you're willing to sell 120, great. If not, we're done. We're moving on to the next property. We'll talk to you in January because your house still won't have sold by then. So the deal died. Then randomly, about 3 hours later, we got a call from the seller's agent saying, okay, they talked it through and if we would do 122, we had a deal. So 122, they told us we had a deal. It's a little frustrating when you get nickel and dimed, particularly when you're up forward and straight and honest and just say, this is the best I'm willing to do under these circumstances. Like I said, I didn't have a project for the winter, so I ran through my numbers again. It's going to be a little bit tighter than I'd like, but at least I'll have something under contract. So we said yes, we'll go ahead, we'll buy this property for 122. So now we have it under contract and we're just going through our due diligence process, doing our home inspection, getting our financing lined up, and scoping out the exact renovations we'll be doing. So in summary, deal number 2, or property number 2, we were able to make work. Property number 1 is a not yet. So the thing is here, we're not considering property number 1 dead. We just know we need to give them more time for them to think it over and for them to become more aware of what the real reality is in today's market right now. It's winter, it's Christmas time. We got over a foot of snow. There's not nearly as many buyers as there was 6 months ago. And so we'll come back to these guys probably in January or February, make another offer at that 115, 120 range and see if we can make a deal happen. But if they're unwilling to budge, we're just going to walk away again and we'll just keep coming back and kicking the can every couple months until either they agree, until they decide not to sell, or until someone else decides to buy it. And that's what it all comes down to, guys, is patience. You just need to be insanely patient when negotiating with sellers. And you need to be confident in your numbers. You can't be wishy-washy. You need to be steadfast. So, in an upcoming video, I'm going to start documenting our exact game plan for property number 2. And I'll lay out kind of our expected budget, how we're going to approach it, how we're going to try and maximize revenues from this property, because it's kind of unique and it's got some weird quirky features that I think your beginner investor would overlook and not realize the potential to earn from this property. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this video, guys. I really appreciate it. Remember, share this on social media if you're getting value. I'm trying to beat Matt Pichet to 500 subscribers and things aren't looking good, so I need your help to get to 500 subscribers. Until next time, remember, making money is a team sport. There's more than enough money out there for us to all make it. So let's just go make some money, guys. Bye.